Hi everyone, happy Sunday. This week we're going to talk about how to find a rental and all the things you need to take into consideration when renting a property in Panama. So I'm going to be reading off my notes because there's a long list of stuff. Now, some of these things are things that I've experienced myself, or they are things that friends of mine have experienced. And they may sound random. Some of them you might think, oh, that would never happen. But they do happen, and then you want to be clear on how things are handled between yourself as the tenant and the owner or property manager. Okay, so got my glasses on so I can see. There basically are three ways to find a property: word of mouth, through a broker, or through a property management company. Those are basically the three ways. Oh, you know what? You can also drive around and see different signs. Like if it's an area where there might be signs out that something is available. That's not common for Panama City. In fact, there's an ordinance that PH buildings, condo buildings, cannot put signs in their windows of anything that's for sale or for lease. So remember also with these things of, word of mouth, a broker, or a property management company, that you want to, check their reviews or referrals, or, check Facebook group posts to, you can put their name in the search bar and just see what kind of information comes up. Because you're new and you haven't established relationships. Unless you've gone on a tour and you trust the tour operator and trust, the referrals that they may give you. But, remember, trust is something that's earned, and also trust your gut instinct about working with anyone. Never, never, never rent something sight unseen. That is just opening yourself up to a host of problems and scams and disappointment. So please do not do that. Get an Airbnb, hotel, or something through VRBO or Booking. Get that for 2 weeks or a month while you look for places in the area. I can't stress this enough. Never rent sight unseen. Okay, so you've identified some properties. Now you need to make your observations and ask questions. So one thing to make note of is the property for sale while it is also for rent? A lot of them are. So, what if the property gets sold 3 months into your lease? Let's say you have a year lease. By law, your lease is supposed to stay in effect, but maybe an owner doesn't want you there as the tenant because they don't want to sell the property, with a lease in place. And what if they've promised the seller without your knowledge that, the tenant's leaving, it'll be no problem, the place will be delivered empty. But what if they never told you that? So you need to be clear on those kind of terms of if a property is for sale during the time that you are also leasing the property. Also, are you going to have to be, open to having the property walked through whenever somebody wants to come see the property? If the property's for sale, does the owner expect that you're just gonna agree to any and all showings? Are they gonna give you advance notice? Are they going to put a lockbox on the house? Are they going to, make sure that you're home? What if you have pets and some broker's coming in and lets your dog out? So those are things that you want to take into consideration. Take a look at the condition, obviously, of the house or apartment. Is it clean? Is there hot water in the shower, in the kitchen? What's the water pressure like? Is there any mold, any weird smells? Take a look under the kitchen sink. That's a place where often leaks can happen. Also look for evidence of leaks at the ceiling, because sometimes in the rainy season, places, roofs will have leaks, and people may not fix the leaks like they should on their properties that are being rented out. Look at the air conditioning units. Do they look clean? Do they look like they've been maintained? Ask when they were last cleaned. Do the neighbors have big parties? Are they smokers? Do they have barking dogs or crowing roosters? What's the noise level in the area, and is it different on a weekend or a holiday? Some places seem very quiet, and then on a weekend, it's just, party central. Take into consideration that you had an appointment to come look at this property, and then you can evaluate what you think that first impression was that that owner or property manager wanted you to have. The condition of the property when you see it is them giving you their best because they had advance notice of you coming. So if you see grimy, mildew, dead bugs, stained blankets, just keep that in mind. That's very important. If you're in a condo building or like a small apartment building, or even a property that has like multiple dwellings, what are the social area rules of, time that you can, be out there, and are they observed or enforced? And especially like the smoking rules. I've stayed at places where there were tons of signs that said, no smoking, no smoking, no smoking. And the guy across the courtyard from me was just chain smoking. And I would tell the owner, and he would say, well, I know, he's just been here a long time. So you want to find out, if people are actually abiding by any rules that are in place. So you also want to know like what the response time is of an owner or property manager if an issue arises. You don't want to have to wait days if you have a problem with your rental. Turn on the faucets, the showers. You want to see what the water pressure is like. And it can vary in dry season and rainy season. Like right now in Valle, our water pressure is like very, very low. And there's a lot of development happening. And I posted on our local Facebook group, hey, does anybody know if Edan, our water provider, and Naturgy, the electric provider, do they have the capacity to support all of this new construction? And I haven't really gotten a clear answer. So that's something to consider. Different areas have different issues with consistency of water availability, water pressure, and electricity. So also do an internet speed test. If the internet is still connected, do a speed test while you're at the property. Look at the quality and cleanliness of the furniture. So take back the covers and look at the mattress. Does it have a mattress protector? Are there stains on the mattress? If it's clean, go ahead and lay on it. Is it comfortable? How well stocked is the kitchen with pots and pans and cooking utensils and sharp knives? A lot of places will just give you one knife and one big spoon, but you might have only one frying pan and then a pot that's only big enough to make a cup of coffee. So you can ask if you know they will be stocking fully, because a furnished place is supposed to be furnished with things that you can use. Also on the property, are there any security cameras, and will you still have privacy? You don't really want to feel like you're in a fishbowl. So if there's a security camera that is facing a patio that you're going to be occupying, can you redirect that camera? I've heard of instances where the owner was furious that the tenant turned the camera away from the patio, but the tenant has a right to privacy when they're living in a space. So that's something to check out. As far as parking, do you have a designated parking space? How many spaces? If it's a condo, that might be helpful. Like if you're gonna have guests come visit, it might be nice, to know that they can have a place to park. Also, are you allowed to have guests, overnight guests, and for how many nights in a month? Some owners are flexible and some are very strict with these rules, and you don't want to be unclear and have someone as a guest and then have some kind of furious property owner or property manager interrogating you about your friend who's visiting. How much notice does an owner or manager give you if they need to access the property? That's not an emergency, obviously. Some owners don't understand that they have to give notice to you as the tenant, and you want to make sure that that's a clear understanding that you have with the manager or the owner. Does the owner have property insurance, like homeowners insurance? And I will tell you, it's not common. It's really not common in Panama. But what happens if you get injured on the property? Or what if thieves come and steal the propane tank and they break in and steal the televisions? Is the owner gonna hold you responsible for that theft? Or are you thinking that the owner is responsible to replace those things? So that's also something to be clear on. If you're renting a casita on a larger property and you're told that the owner rarely comes to use the house, don't 100% believe that. This happened to someone that I know. She was told that the owner is rarely ever there, and then it turned out that they were always there, and there were small barking dogs and kids and grandchildren. So you just have to take that into consideration. If they say like, oh, we're hardly ever here, maybe 50% you could trust that as being completely accurate. So if you're renting somewhere on a shared property where there's multiple casitas or like duplexes or a house with 3 other casitas, these are some things that are important to know also, because let's say that you rent the property and you move in with your little dog, and there's maybe only one other person that's renting on the property. But what if somebody comes in and they have an aggressive dog? Are there any rules for the aggressive dog? You know, let's say you've let your little dog run around and the other person thinks that their big aggressive dog should be able to run around. What do you agree on? What's the position of the owner? You know, is there a maximum, you know, number of pets that are allowed? If you live in a place and, you know, everybody has 2 dogs, that might feel like too much. So if you want to ask if there's, you know, a maximum number of pets that are allowed on the property in total. You want to know if, you know, the smoking or quiet hours are observed and how they would be enforced. Some owners are very hands-off and they just want people to, you know, figure it out for themselves. But if you're renting a place on a property and there were rules established, but other tenants aren't observing them, I would expect the owner or the property manager to get involved and do something, but that's not always the case. So you want to know ahead of time how proactive and involved is the property manager or the owner. What about, you know, shared spaces? If there's like a laundry room, is there a pool? Is there a gazebo? Or not a gazebo, but like, you know, like a place, a patio that's covered. Is that space being taken over by a few tenants? You know, what if somebody's setting up tables and doing their tie-dye projects all the time and playing their music, and so it becomes like an area that you don't really want to go because that person's there all the time occupying that space. And then are parking areas enforced, or is your garden view going to be obstructed by somebody's big truck that has decided to park closer to their property but isn't in a designated parking space? Let's say that, you know, you move in with cats that go outside, and then another tenant comes in a couple months later with a big dog, and that dog is scaring the cats, and let's say you've asked that other tenant if they could put the dog on a leash and they say no. Is the owner going to get involved? Is the property manager going to get involved? Like, what kind of assurances do you have that they're going to be able to resolve any situations? Because these things come up. A lot of these things are either things that have happened to people I know or to me personally. And are there any limits on laundry hours or how many times you're allowed to do laundry? There's a place in town, the El Valle Suites, where I stayed for maybe 3 or 4 months, and we were allowed to do laundry up to a certain time, and we could only do 1 load a week. And that was because the place was like an apartment hotel, so they need the laundry room to do all of their laundering when they have the weekend guests after they leave. So that's understandable, but you wanna know. If you're a, you know, nighttime laundry person and you do 3 loads of laundry a week, take that into consideration if the place that you're looking at has any kind of, you know, hours or usage restrictions. Is the internet speed affected by multiple users, and are there any boosters on the property? That was an issue for me at the suites because I was at the very end of the building, and so the signal wasn't very strong. I had to position myself like very close to the front door if I wanted a good, strong signal. So you want to find out in your rent what's included and how is it paid. You have water, electricity, propane gas, cable, and internet. And then if you're in a house, there might be, a gardener, pool care, and pest maintenance. I think that if you're going to be somewhere for just like less than a year, if you're not planning on doing a long-term rental, I would really advise that you not put any utilities in your name. But that said, let's say that they're in the owner's name and the owner is late paying their cable bill and it gets disconnected. What do you do in that situation? Let's say it's disconnected for a week because they're out of the country. They're on a cruise and they can't get a signal to get your text messages that, the cable's been out for a week. So that's something to consider. So for short-term rental, it is not worth the headache of putting the water and electricity in your name. I was told to do this when I rented short-term in Coronado. They knew I was gonna be there like under a year, and the owner and my friend, who's not my friend anymore, she was the insurance person that I used, they told me that I had to put the electric bill in my name and the internet. This was a condo, so the water was included. So I did that, and then it took 8 months to get my deposit back from Naturgy. And I had to drive to, I think, Pʀᴏ𴘏, to that Naturgy office because there was no local office that would handle connections and your refund of your deposit. So I would highly recommend that you just keep that in the owner's name. Water and cable and internet should be included in your monthly rent. For the electricity, will the owner show you the bill each month? You don't want to just get some random number texted to you that you owe. And is your unit separately metered? What if your little one-bedroom casita shares a meter with two other two-bedroom casitas on a property? Are they just dividing up that electricity bill into thirds and you're paying more than what you're actually using? So you want to find out if you're on a separate meter, and will you get to see a bill each month that you would then, just pay to the owner, and then they would, take care of the bill. Who's responsible for repairs in the house or property? So if you move in and the washing machine breaks in month 1, or the air conditioning stops working, or a ceiling fan stops working, outside light fixtures fall off the building, who's paying for that? Who's responsible for those? I would not want to be responsible for a broken refrigerator if I just moved into a place and 2 months later the fridge died. I believe that's the owner's responsibility. What about clogged drains? Are you going to be responsible for calling a plumber if there's a clogged drain? What about, if water starts backing up? Or what if there's a septic tank issue? What if they've never cleaned the septic tank? And then all of a sudden you're, living there 6 months and all sorts of weird septic issues are happening. Are they going to expect you to cover that because you're living there? Or are they going to cover it because it's their property? And these are things you need to talk about and get in writing. So you can negotiate the rent. Panama is a place where negotiations happen on a variety of things. You can even negotiate, when you get pulled over for a speeding ticket. Although I do not advise or recommend paying the police officer, because that just encourages that bad practice. But you can negotiate the rent, if you've done your research and you know what different places are renting for that you've seen in the area. And yeah, absolutely negotiate. The worst that can happen is they say no, and then you pay what they were asking. Don't agree to anything verbally. Get it in writing. I made this mistake from that former friend, and the owner of the condo unit, who both said while we were all sitting in the apartment, "Oh, no problem, month to month is fine, no problem, just give me a month's notice." Even though the written lease said that it was a year lease. Because at the end of that, the owner conveniently forgot that I was month to month and she wasn't going to return my deposit. There was also a clause in that agreement that I had to pay for air conditioning cleaning. I'm not sure if it was twice a year or what the frequency was, but apparently that's common to see that, you have to pay for routine air conditioning cleaning. And there was a clause that I had to repaint the walls of the apartment before leaving. And, I had them cross that out and negotiate to remove those clauses if you don't think they're reasonable. I don't think it's reasonable to paint an apartment before I leave, because that is part of the owner's responsibility. That's just part of routine maintenance and upkeep of a rental unit. And yeah, I did not want to be responsible for that. Also, it's good to know if you're going to have any storage space. You might have a surfboard or a bicycle or beach chairs, stuff that you don't want to fit into your condo. So it's good to know if you have outside storage available to use. I wanted to let you know that I have another book release. This is another journal in the series of shadow work journal books that I'm writing and publishing. Also, if you've read any of my books, it would be so appreciated if you could leave an honest review on Amazon. As you know, that's how people decide whether a book is right for them, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Most of the rental agreements will be written in Spanish, so have someone review it and translate it for you, or at the minimum, use Google Lens to translate the agreement. And just don't sign anything unless you're really 100% clear on what you're signing. Another thing to consider is, let's say that unit, you flip back the covers on the bed and it was disgusting and you could see springs and you knew you would never get a good night's sleep. Ask if the owner will remove some furniture. Let's say you want to bring in your own couch and your own bed. Will they remove the furniture so that you can bring in your own bed and your nice comfy couch? All right, now let's move on to paying the deposit and your rent. So technically in Panama, it's common that you have 1 month's rent and a deposit, which is equal to 1 month's rent. They don't really do first, last, and security deposit here. And technically, the deposits are supposed to go to the Ministry of Housing. So your rental deposit that you get back at the end of your lease term, unless you've caused significant damage, is supposed to be returned to you from the Ministry of Housing. But a lot of landlords don't follow this law. You can ask them if they're going to put the deposit with the Ministry of Housing. And you just have to be aware of that if they're not going to. And do you get a sense that you're going to get your deposit back? Because, you know, that's always a little bit of a vague area. You know, an owner can claim that you did damage that is considered normal wear and tear and maybe deduct that from your deposit. You definitely want to be clear on that. Take pictures when you are taking possession of the property. Take pictures of everything, how the condition that everything is in upon your move-in. That way you have, you know, you have proof of what it was like when you moved in. You can pay by cash, bank transfer, or like a third-party app like Wise. Get a receipt no matter how you're paying, but especially if you're paying cash, get a receipt, a signed receipt from the owner or property manager. Absolutely, that's crucial. Moving in. Ensure that the house or condo will be thoroughly and professionally cleaned before you take possession. At your walkthrough, before you're going to be signing a lease, show the manager or the owner specific things that you expect to be cleaned. If there are stains on the floors, if there's sticky areas on the counters, if there's cobwebs and spider nests, if there's, you know, just crud and dust and dead bugs, be very clear and specific. And I would even say that you put that into the agreement, that the house will be professionally cleaned before you move in, or you will be deducting X amount of money from your second month's rent, because you'll probably have to hire a cleaner to come in and clean if they don't do it. And this happens. The place that I moved into, that was my friend's place, it was filthy. It was just absolutely filthy. And the owner said that it was clean. They also had a roach infestation in that building, which I wasn't told about. So that goes back to, you know, asking about pest maintenance. Like, is there any spraying, you know, for pests? You also want to find out, you know, when they do that. Are you going to be given notice? Because if you have pets, you might want to, you know, take them off the property for a while. You don't know how toxic the spray might be. This is interesting. This happened to a friend of mine. She rented a place in the city, in Panama City, and just, you know, went to move in, bring their boxes, and the building management stopped them and told them, no, you can't use the regular elevators, and you can't move in on a Wednesday at 11 o'clock. You have to make an appointment. You can only move in at certain hours, and you have to use the freight elevators, and you have to pay $100 to be able to do that. So if you're renting in a condo building, no matter where it is, ask about moving your stuff in. You don't want to be caught off guard, you know, thinking you're going to be able to move in on Thursday at your leisure and then be prevented from actually using the elevators. That would be incredibly stressful. If you're moving into a place that has, you know, multiple dwellings, are there other tenants that have animals that are going to be running around? You know, what if they have a dog that just chases you every time, you know, you're out in the yard? That might get a little bit annoying. And then also, if you're in a a high rise of some sort, make yourself known to the security guards and the concierge people at the desk. It's very important to do that so that they know who you are. They can be very helpful for you, and it's just good to establish that relationship. All right, that's it. That was a lot, but there's a lot that can happen. I think you can understand that, right? After listening to all these different scenarios. So keep that all in mind as you're looking for a place to rent. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. I really, really appreciate it. I am almost at 5,000 subscribers. So if you're not subscribed yet and you want to help me get to that goal, just hit that button today and let's do it. Because at 5,000 subscribers, I'm going to try and start getting some sponsors for my videos. Thanks so much. I'll see you next week.